today for our Longleaf Management Incentives Program webinar. We're so excited to have you here. We have some great speakers lined up from several different organizations, and I'm excited to get the chance to talk with you today. Also just have a couple friendly reminders for us. Please turn off your cameras and mute your microphones. We'll have, our cameras and microphones on for our speakers. If you have any questions, please put those in the chat box. We'll be monitoring the chat for your comments and questions, and we'll have time for questions, any questions you might have for the speakers to answer at the end of each presentation. And we have a quick poll at the end of the webinar, so if you wouldn't mind sticking around, we'd like to get your feedback on today's webinar topics, as well as what you would like to see for the next webinar. This webinar is being hosted on behalf of the O2 LIT partnership, the Okefenokee Osceola partnership, and the Nature Conservancy. So really looking to promote longleaf management in South Georgia and North Florida area. You can learn more about upcoming opportunities through that Okefenokee Osceola partnership by contacting Rebecca Shelton with the Nature Conservancy. You can see her email below. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over. Our first speaker today is Ryan Phillips with the Georgia Forestry Commission. He's going to talk about some of the available programs through GFC. He's their cost share coordinator, and I'm going to throw it over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Susan. Can you see my screen? Am I on the first slide?
Yes, I can see it.
Good deal. Well, like Susan said, I'm Ryan Phillips. I'm the cost share coordinator with the Georgia Forestry Commission. And today I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about our forest management incentive programs, and also known as our cost share programs for forest landowners. So before I get started, I'll give a brief overview of the Georgia Forestry Commission and our involvement with these programs. We have approximately 30 field foresters that work with these programs, and we kind of serve in two different capacities. One is we administer programs with funds that we're given to that are given to us or funded from outside groups, and then we also serve as a technical service provider, which means we provide technical assistance for some of our partners like Natural Resource Conservation Service and the Farm Service Agency. We work with landowners in the field to provide forestry technical assistance for some of their programs like CRP, EFRP, and EQIP. The way most of the programs we work with, the way that they kind of work on the ground is a landowner applies for to participate in the program, and then our field foresters will come out and make a site visit, and we'll meet with that landowner, develop a resource management plan, kind of a plan outline and recommendations for practices to be completed. And then once those landowners are approved and they implement those practices and get those practices completed on site, then we'll come out and verify that the practice has been completed and do a performance check. And at that time, the landowners are reimbursed or given their cost share payment. All the programs that I'm going to go over today are listed on our website at gatrees.org on our cost share and forest incentive program page. So that has a great overview for programs available to landowners. So this is just a brief overview of most of the programs that we work with on a statewide scale. And you can see the program listed and then the administering agency next to them. So Conservation Reserve Program, CRP, and Emergency Forest Restoration Program, EFRP, both of those programs are administered through the Farm Service Agency. EQIP and CSP, both of those are administered through NRCS. Then our two biggest programs are our Southern Pine Beetle Prevention Program and Invasive Plant Control Program. Those programs are administered through the Georgia Forestry Commission, and then the Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program. And you can see that that's the sign up is through U.S. Fish and Wildlife there. And the major theme today for me is going to be the importance of getting to know your local representatives, because You know, once you get to know your FSA and NRCS counterparts, or you know, you'll be more informed on deadlines and when the programs are coming available. So that's critical to making sure that you don't miss out on any signups. First, I'll briefly go over the Conservation Reserve Program. As I mentioned, this is administered through the Farm Service Agency. There's currently around 300,000 acres enrolled in Georgia, and in Georgia, CRP is mainly a tree practice. The CRP focuses on converting cropland to forest land. So if you're a landowner that's got cropland and you're interested in converting that to forest land, this is a great option. They're long contracts, 10 to 15 years, and but the benefit of that is the landowner actually receives a annual rental payment. So there's two kinds of signups. There's a general signup, which are your CP3 and 3A practices, and these are more timber objective practices. And so the way that general signup works, FSA will hold a signup period. Landowners apply, they'll batch those applications, turn them in, and then the national office will announce approval. So it's a competitive ranking process. And then landowners that plan to follow through with participating, they'll receive 50% cost share rate plus their annual rental payment that they receive on top of that. The continuous sign-up works a little differently. This is more for your longleaf and wildlife based objectives. And as long as there are acres available in your state, and so in this case, Georgia, there are acres available. So if you're interested in participating in a CP36, which is a longleaf establishment practice, and you're within the longleaf planting zone, then you can sign up to participate in this program. There's no ranking, as I mentioned, as long as there's acres, and there are. The landowner will then receive a 50% cost share rate on all the practices on everything that's involved with establishing the practice. So that would be establishing the tree cover and also the herbaceous ground cover, plus the practice incentive payment. Once the practice is established, they'll receive that incentive payment. They will receive a sign-up incentive payment for participating in the program, and then they'll also receive an annual rental payment every year that they're enrolled in the program. Next is the Emergency Forest Restoration Program. This is programs also administered through FSA. This is a program that targets restoring forest after natural disasters. It includes natural and artificial regeneration. So, you know, hurricanes, tornadoes, ice storms, anytime that a natural disaster occurs and impacts your property or destroys your forest, reach out to FSA to let them know this damage has occurred. And this program will target a 75% cost share up, but will not go over 75% of the actual cost. So like I mentioned, just if you have a natural disaster, reach out to FSA immediately. So that way the local county office knows there's a need to implement the program, and then the county office will forward that need to the state office, and the state office will send that to Washington, and then the fund will be activated, and funds will be appropriated by Congress. Next is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. This is administered through NRCS, and we serve as a partner for this program. Daniel's going to go in more in depth on this program later. I just wanted to mention that we do provide technical assistance for this program. This is a great opportunity for forest landowners, and this program has great pay rates and includes most practices that forest landowners need to manage their forest land. So next is the Southern Pine Beetle Prevention Program. This is a program that is funded from the U.S. Forest Service. They give us funds to administer this program. So this program is actually administered through the Georgia Forestry Commission. And the idea of the program is to reduce the risk of future southern pine beetle outbreaks. So, you know, the idea is that best prevention is good forest management. So, you know, maintaining a healthy stand density is a priority of this program. Also controlling competition in the stand with herbicides and prescribed burning. And and also tree planting is a piece of this program as well, to plant species that are most resistant or to southern pine beetle outbreaks, and planting healthy density spacings. This is just a picture of an active southern pine beetle outbreak. You can kind of see from the photo where the outbreak started and how it spread, and this active edge at the bottom of the picture. So the sign-up period in Georgia normally occurs in the spring or early summer, and it's kind of split into two different pots. We'll typically have a prevention pot, which is for current pine stands where southern that may be at risk for southern pine beetle. And the practices that we have are pre-commercial thinning, and that's $70 an acre. Pine release, which is treating woody stems in the stand, mainly hardwood stems, deciduous stems, with chemicals, herbicides, and that's $40 an acre, and then prescribed burning at $5 an acre. And then the other pot, it would be your restoration pot, which is the tree planting pot, and planting pine and hardwood is allowed, and our rate for that is $100 an acre. And there's also a suppression practices for anybody that has current southern pine beetle active spots. We have funds available to help with those suppression activities. There's a 10-acre practice minimum, and the maximum limit per year per landowner for this year was $10,000 for restoration and $5,000 for prevention practices. Our sign-up process is real simple. It can be completed online. It's a real short, simple application, and then applications are ranked based on southern pine beetle hazard ranking for the county, and then the practice type that has been applied for. Another program we have that's funded from the U.S. Forest Service is our invasive plant control program. The sign-up period usually mirrors that of our southern pine beetle, when we typically take applications at the same time. Spring, early summer, our target species are privet, Japanese climbing fern, Chinese tallow tree, China berry, and Callery pear. And so if you have any of these species on your property, you're eligible to participate in the program, and the reimbursement is $60 an acre, up to $4,500 maximum, and the minimum practice size is 3 acres for this program. Another good opportunity is the Community Protection Grant. This is a partnership we have with the U.S. Forest Service, and this is for landowners within 10 miles of a national forest. The way it works is U.S. Forest Service gives us a grant, and if you're within in close proximity to the national forest, the Georgia Forestry Commission will come out, plow your fire breaks, and do prescribed burn on your property at no cost to the landowner. Our time is all reimbursed by U.S. Forest Service, and the priorities are distance from the national forest, fuel loads, and then also priorities placed on inaccessible areas where wildfires could occur. And so to sign up for this program, you sign up through the Georgia Forestry Commission county office, or your local forester, either one. So with that, that's all that I have. I'm the cost share coordinator with Georgia Forestry Commission. Here's my contact information. And with that, I'll take questions.
Thanks, Ryan. If anybody has questions for Ryan, feel free to put them in the chat. Not seeing any right now. If you think of any for any of our attendees, please feel free to put it in the chat. We'll have some time at the end of the webinar as well. We'll go ahead and move on to our second speaker, Jason Alstad with the Georgia Conservancy. He is a land stewardship coordinator with them, and he'll be discussing some prescribed fire cost share programs today.
Thank you very much, Susan, and thank all of y'all for being here. This was a great opportunity for y'all to hopefully learn something new. And for me to learn something new as well. I've already learned something, so that's awesome. I love when that comes to fruition. So we have what's called a regional conservation partnership program, and that is a program in the Farm Bill with the NRCS. But what our job is to do with the Georgia Conservancy is to kind of help roll that out. And we have a lot of partners, Susan being one of them, and obviously the NRCS, Georgia Forestry Commission, Georgia DNR, and so many others, Nature Conservancy, that that are helping roll this program out. And what it does is it allows us to target funds to particular landowners for to kind of help meet their objectives, as long as they align with what our program lays out. And so what our program, the narrative of our program is the Georgia Sentinel Landscape. And the Georgia Sentinel Landscape is comprised in southeast Georgia, and it does stretch over to West Georgia and a portion in South Central as well. And I'll actually give you all of the counties that qualify here at the end. But it's surrounding all of the military installations in Georgia, and two tenets of the program are, one of them is we have conservation easements. And so there's a certain buffer area around each military installation that you would qualify to get reimbursement for putting your land into conservation easements. And then the other portion of our program is land management. And with that land management, we've decided to target prescribed fire, specifically through the coastal plain of Georgia, to kind of restore it to its historical range. And some of you might be asking, I've been told my whole life that fires are bad, we should put them out. Well, in southeastern Georgia and southeast in general, the longleaf pine ecosystem is dependent on fire. And so some of the benefits of fire can be to remove those hazardous fuel loads that Ryan was talking about before. You get these really thick stands, and then it just becomes, kind of a ticking time bomb if there is a fire. And so what you can do is you can thin that out. You can use fire to thin it out, and that will help, as long as it's maintained with fire, that will help prevent those future fuel loads from coming back and kind of creating that hazard. Another reason is a lot of private landowners like to manage their land for wildlife. And so there's all different kind of, nesting ground birds and turkey, and deer, and all different other kind of wildlife, as well as, threatened and endangered species. Some people like to manage their land for threatened and endangered species. So there's a lot of opportunities to use fire for wildlife habitat. It does help improve forest health and nutrient cycling, as well as, kind of controlling unwanted vegetation. You get a lot of hardwoods, you can top kill them. And that, what's so great about fire is it's easy and it's just so cost effective. Herbicide, especially in today's economy, is outrageously expensive. Those chemicals, when you put them out into the environment, they're going to have to go somewhere. And so, there's always a time and a place for herbicide, but fire, if you can get away with it, it's just such a better alternative. And then what a lot of people like to do is they like to create aesthetically pleasing landscapes. So when you have a nice pine stand that's been thinned, and you're able to get sunlight down to the ground, and you can get a lot of these native warm season grasses and other plants that create this just kind of gorgeous prairie style landscape. So a lot of people just want their woods to look good. And so that's certainly another reason to kind of use prescribed fire. So some of the criteria to get into our program. So, we are the Georgia Conservancy, and this program is specific to Georgia. So I know there's a few of y'all that are from out of state. So unfortunately, this program won't apply to any other state other than Georgia. And then within Georgia, of the 159 counties, we only have 60 that qualify. And my apologies, this is going to be a little painful, but bear with me. I'm going to read off all 60 counties real quick alphabetically. And that way, any of the Georgia residents that are interested, just kind of keep your ear out for if you qualify in one of these counties, and we can certainly get the ball rolling if y'all would like to reach out. Starting with Appling, Atkinson, Bacon, Ben Hill, Berrien, Bibb, Brantley, Bryan, Bullock, Burke, Camden, Candler, Charlton, Chatham, Chattahoochee, Coffee, Columbia, Dodge, Dooley, Daltrey, Effingham, Emmanuel, Evans, Glenn, Glasgow, Houston, Irwin, Jeff Davis, Jefferson, Jenkins, Lanier, Lawrence, Liberty, Long, Lowndes, Macon, Marion, McIntosh, Montgomery, Muskogee, Pierce, Pulaski, Richmond, Schley, Screven, Sumter, Talbot, Tatnall, Taylor, Telfair, Toombs, Trutland, Turner, Twiggs, Ware, Wayne, Wheeler, Wilcox, Worth, and my apologies. I know I probably pronounced some of those counties different that I've never been to. So we all, I tend to say Talbot, and people from Talbot say, county say Talbot, and so my apologies if I mispronounced your county. But so different criteria that in our ranking system. So if you're in one of those 60 counties, that's the first step. You're in the Sentinel landscape, so you do qualify at least geographically. And one of the things we're targeting in our program is we're trying to restore the gopher tourist population, getting them to a certain threshold where the federal government won't have to come in and claim them threatened or endangered in Georgia. And so if we can get to a certain number of viable populations for the gopher tourist population, we can kind of prevent the listing process. And so we've only got, I think, 5 or 6 more populations to go. And so if your property is, and this is something that we can help you figure out, if your property has, you'll know if you have existing gopher toruses, but if you also just have the soils that are, indicative of gopher tortoise habitat, that also qualifies, because this will help restore that habitat and ideally kind of help restore that, corridor to that area. Another one would be your acreage. How big is your property? The larger, the better. We do, we try to shoot for anything, over 30, 50, but there are certain exceptions that we can make if you are on the smaller side. We can't really go anything under probably 25, but there are certain exceptions. If you just meet all of the criteria and your acreage is small, you'd certainly qualify. Another one would be, kind of what's your stand look like? Or, if you have, dominant pines, especially longleaf, you're going to rank really high. And then it kind of comes down from there to hardwoods. And then eventually you just, you'll rank out of that particular category. Another big one that we're targeting is historically underserved communities. Pardon me. And what that kind of qualifies for, and what the people that qualify as historically underserved are veterans, women, minorities, first generation or first time farmers, and a few others. So that's another opportunity to help your application rank higher and kind of get to the top of the list for getting these cost share reimbursements. And then again, it just really, you have to be in the Sentinel landscape. If you're not in one of those 60 counties, unfortunately, you wouldn't qualify. But, if you are, please do reach out. Susan will have our contact information in that. And at this point, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jason. We've had a couple questions come into the chat for Ryan, and if anybody has questions for Jason, feel free to add those in. Ryan, we do have one question from Claire Cox asking if longleaf is included in the Southern Pine Beetle Prevention Program.
Yes, longleaf is included for prescribed burning in stands that are under 10 years old, and also for tree planting. So yes, longleaf is included. Do you want me to go ahead and work on some of these other ones too?
Sure. I just responded for Jeff Sipes for the Community Protection Program. It is available in Texas. I was looking real quick and have the link for you, Jeff. If you go to the website available through Texas A&M Forest Service, the application period last year for 2022 was in September in Texas. If you go to that link, it also has the link to an interactive map, and depending on where you are in Texas, you can see if they have an updated deadline for the coming year as well. Was there anything else, Ryan, that you saw come in for you?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. And then Jason, can you maybe give a little bit of clarification with the program with the Georgia Forestry Commission, or I'm sorry, with the Georgia Conservancy, that how the sign up and that kind of thing works, what it is? We have a couple people that were a little unclear.
Yes, ma'am. So signups are typically, if you reach out to me, we can get your application process going. The open period will be from between October and November is when the NRCS will open it to submit these applications. But what we'll do is we'll take your information now, come out, do a site visit. First it'll start off as a phone call or an email, and we'll kind of go through the criteria list to see how you rank. And if you meet any of those qualifications, the next step would be that we would come and do a site visit. And then from there, we would talk about some of the cost share reimbursement. So we do getting the fire, the three things to get reimbursed for would be getting the fire on the ground, doing fire breaks, and we also provide management plans. And so, sometimes all three of those tie together. Sometimes you might just be using one of the three. And so that will come in the form of technical assistance, and we pay by the foot and the acre. The rates aren't exactly clear right now because it's going to be a 3-year program, but they're in the high teens to low 20s, depending on how many applicants we have. And if anyone has anything more specific, please feel free to reach out. And I will put my email in there right now in the chat.
Thanks, Jason. And we'll also have everyone a slide at the end of today's webinar with all of our speakers' contact information via email on it as well, so you can follow up on any specific questions that you might think of too after the webinar. So thanks, Jason. I'm going to go ahead and roll on to our next speaker, Daniel Westcott. He is with USDA-NRCS here in Georgia. He's going to be discussing some of the federal programs available through the Farm Bill that are offering assistance to landowners to help address natural resource concerns. So Daniel, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Okay, Susan. Hang on a second, let me get this pulled up. Okay, does that look correct, Susan?
Looks good. Thanks, Daniel.
Okay. So again, my name is Daniel Westcott. I'm a district conservationist, USDA-NRCS in Sylvania, Georgia. I'm on the state line of Georgia and South Carolina, cover a couple of counties in that area. And I'm going to discuss Farm Bill programs related to NRCS and, some of the ins and outs of it today. We're a national agency, of course, as being with USDA and NRCS. So every state in the country, that has NRCS or local county offices, and they administer same Farm Bill programs. Now, each state does have some differences in initiatives. So depending on the state that you're in, some of these initiatives may or may not be applicable to y'all. But I just encourage you to contact your local field.
You're echoing a bit. Can you try to talk?
My mic. Yeah, hold on. Okay, is that better?
Better, thank you.
All right. So just, keep in mind that this is pretty much applicable to Georgia, but it should translate to pretty much any state in the Southeast. So NRCS provides technical and financial assistance on natural resource related issues to individuals, groups, communities, counties across the country, protecting soil and water on 34 million acres of privately owned land here in Georgia. NRCS is a non-regulatory agency. You as a landowner have to invite us on your property as a voluntary basis for us to come work with. The major programs that I'm going to discuss today related to NRCS is EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, CSP, Conservation Stewardship Program, and then ACIP, the Agriculture Conservation Program, and what that relates. I'm going to skip the Healthy Forest Reserve Program, and Ryan has already touched on these FSA programs, so I'm going to skip those as well. I'm mainly skipping the Healthy Forest Reserve Program because It's still in the Farm Bill, but Congress has not allocated funds to that program since, I think, 2009, if I remember my years correctly on that. So it's still in the Farm Bill, but it doesn't do us much good if they don't allocate us funds. So EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, provides financial and technical assistance to address natural resource concerns and deliver environmental benefits such as improved water and air quality, conserved ground and surface water, reduce soil erosion, sedimentation, and improve or created wildlife habitat. So everything I'm going to discuss with y'all strictly relates to forestry and wildlife habitat. We do a whole host of other things in EQIP with ag land and pasture land outside of forestry, but I'm going to stick primarily to what we do in EQIP. So in EQIP, we have a general forestry category. So we do a lot of tree establishment with that, so we can provide financial assistance for site prep, chemical and mechanical methods deemed based off of our site visit, what is applicable to your site to get it suitable for reestablishment. We pay for reestablishment of trees. In Georgia, we do loblolly, slash, and longleaf and hardwoods if it's applicable to the area. A couple of eligibility things with that is soil types, depending on what species you want to establish in that area. And the trees have to be cut prior to the application deadline and us making our site visit. We can't plant trees if the trees haven't been cut type thing. Forest stand improvement, that's our thinning, pre-commercial thinning operations. And we also do some patch clear cuts as well for establishing wildlife habitat edges and micro ecosystems. So we do that as well. Depending on which initiative or type of forest stand improvement you sign up for, will have a different parameter on the thinning density. With the basal area has to be by the time you finish thinning the trees. Some of the additional things that we can do in the general forestry category is prescribed burning, either as a management or site prep burn. We do brush management, so that's chemical or mechanical methods of understory control. So this is mid-management activities and practices. We also do herbaceous weed control. Primarily, this is generally done within the first 1 to 3 years after pine trees are established. Broad band spraying in between the rows of pine trees or spray over the top in certain situations. We have wildlife habitat plantings for permanent vegetation cover for pollinator habitat and native season grasses. This isn't food plot establishment. This is actually establishing permanent native cover in anywhere from a half an acre to 3 acres in size is what we're looking at. There are additional forestry practices available depending on what you're wanting to do, but those are kind of the big ones that we work with, and we could spend an entire hour talking about just that. So I just encourage you to kind of work with your local field offices on identifying anything outside of this, but these are the largest ones that we provide financial assistance on there here. In the EQIP program as well, I mentioned some initiatives. One of the largest initiatives we do is the Longleaf Pine Initiative. It's for the establishment and management of Longleaf Pine. That's the only thing that is eligible for funding in this category. So everything that I just talked about, general forestry is applicable as long as it's implemented on longleaf stands. We can establish longleaf, management activities on longleaf, we can do thinning activities on longleaf. Anything that is related to those previous practices, just pertaining to longleaf stands. We also have a Working Lands for Wildlife initiative. It's primarily identifying habitats of concern for specific wildlife species that are in decline, and there are some specific practices that are identified as eligible for that initiative. And so in Georgia, our targeted identified species are bobwhite quail. We have a Conasauga River aquatic species one, gopher tortoise, golden winged warbler. So for each one of those species, then that means you're not eligible for that specific initiative in, you know, that concern. So EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, has different financial assistance rates. General assistance is, so anybody that walks in the door is eligible for general assistance. That's 75% assistance. Then the historically underserved categories are eligible for 90%. The historically underserved category is defined underneath the Farm Bill as beginning farmer. That's anybody who's been farming for 10 years or less, generally based off of how many years you've been filing a Schedule F on your taxes. Your minority categories, which unfortunately does not include women by the definition of the Farm Bill. It's just ethnically based minority categories. And then there is a limited resource producer one as well. That's based off of your income and set poverty level for that county. And there's an online determination tool that we use through USDA.com or .gov for making that determination. The cost list that we utilize is a regional cost list. So in Georgia, I think we share the same cost list as Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, Florida. So that is a set cost rate. We cannot exceed that amount per acre or linear foot or whatever the unit of measure is for paying that out. So an example would be if we say on our cost list it takes $100 an acre to just plant the pine trees. I'm not talking about site prep or any of the other activities. We're talking about that. So if we say it takes $100 an acre to plant an acre of pine trees, that means you as a producer will get $75 or $90 per acre to plant that acre of pine trees. It doesn't matter what it costs you to get the work done. If it costs you $80 to get the work done, you still get $75. If it costs you $120, you still get $75 an acre. So it's a set cost list, and we have no flexibility on that at all whatsoever. Depending on where you are in the country, that cost list could vary slightly, you know, for regionality cost associated with that. The next program I will mention is the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP, as it's commonly known. Helps agriculture producers maintain and improve their existing conservation systems and adopt additional conservation activities to address priority natural resource concerns. Participants earn CSP payments for conservation performance. The higher the performance, the higher the payment. So what does all that mean? So basically what it boils down to is in CSP, we have two types of contracts. We have agriculture, so strictly related to farming practices, orchards, hayland, pasture, things of that nature all falls under the agriculture category. And then we also have what is known as non-industrial private forestry, or NIPS. So that's our forestry contract. CSP is done on a 5-year contract, where EQIP is typically a 2-year contract to get everything done. CSP is done on a 5-year contract. The maximum amount that one landowner can get per contract and even per farm bill is $200,000. Producer must enroll all acres they have control of for 5 years. An assessment of existing and planned activities must meet a conservation threshold to be eligible for the program. So your annual payment is made up of two different things. At your initial time of application, we run through an assessment with you, and you answer a set of questions. And based off of that set of questions and how you answer it, you are identified as meeting X amount of resource concerns at the time of contract. So there's a multiplier that comes into play with that dollars. So let's say it's $300 per resource concern that you're addressing at the time of contract, times, let's say you were addressing 5 resource concerns. That'd be $1,500, plus you get so much per acre for every acre enrolled. Let's say that ends up being $500. So what we would call your base payment that you would receive every year for the life of the contract would be $2,000. Okay. In addition to that, we have what's called enhancements that you agree to do during the life of the contract, and it's on a schedule. So during year 2, you're going to thin 200 acres of trees down to this basal area, or you're going to plant 100 acres of trees, or you're going to do so much prescribed burning. However, you work with your local field office, and y'all come up with a plan with enhancements that you're wanting to do for the life of the contract, and schedule those enhancements by year, by specific amounts, and identify those locations on your property where you want to do those activities. At the end, during that whole year, that fiscal year, which starts October 1, runs through September 30th, you keep track of all the work that you do that's supposed to be done that year. And then at the end of each fiscal year, usually the field office sends out a letter and says, CSP annual payment time, please bring in your documentation to show that you completed all enhancements to our conservation standards and specifications. So you bring in your prescribed burn plan and pictures of you doing your burning and maps showing how many acres were burned. Same thing with your tree establishment. You bring in a map showing where you planted trees, the density trees per acre that were planted, what you did for your site prep, things of that nature. And that's part of your CSP documentation. The field office reviews that. If you fully implemented it to what's in the contract, you get the full payment. But if, let's say, for some reason on the burning you were supposed to do 100 acres, but due to weather and other issues, you only got 50 acres done. Well, you would get the base payment plus the payment for the 50 acres you did, and that other 50 acres goes away as far as that goes. You just certify what you did and get paid for what you did. Okay. The other program that's related to forestry is our easement program, Agriculture Conservation Easement Program, or ACIP. Helps landowners, land trusts, and other entities protect, restore, and enhance wetlands, grasslands, working farms, and ranches through conservation easements. So there's actually 2 types of easements underneath ACIP, and I'm just going to cover one of them because it's the only one that really pertains to the large forest land, and that's the Wetland Reserve Program. NRCS helps restore, protect, and enhance enrolled wetlands through permanent and 30-year easements. A few of the eligibility things: land must have hydrologic restoration and hydric soils to be eligible for consideration. The easement is held by NRCS, and the landowner retains ownership of the land, but the landowner receives a one-time lump sum payment for enrolled acres based on a third-party real estate value. Basically, you own the land. We are purchasing certain rights from the property, management and development rights. You still own the land, you still have to pay taxes on the land. You can still utilize the land for recreation. You can even do certain activities. You own the property as long as you have a compatible use agreement with NRCS. So anything that's done on that piece of land has to be approved by NRCS prior to you implementing the work. So how do you get started with NRCS? So we call it the 5 steps to assistance: planning, application, eligibility, ranking, and implementation. So NRCS conservationists will develop a conservation plan that addresses your needs, identified resource concerns, and then any federal, state, and local agency requirements depending on what you're wanting to do. We put together a plan that has job sheets, engineering designs that's needed, standards and specifications, how you will implement what we're asking you to do so that we can actually pay you for it, so it meets our standards. We also, at that time, after kind of going through a plan, is put in an application for a program that best meets your needs during the application period. So all of our programs are under what's called a continuous sign-up period. So 365 days a year, Monday through Friday, during office business hours, you can submit an application for any of these programs and provide and have it on file with the office. As long as that application is in by the application cutoff period or the batching period for that specific fiscal year, is considered a valid application and will run through the ranking assessment process, which I'll cover here in a second. If it comes in the day after, it's still a valid application. It just goes on the docket for the next sign-up period. You've got to have legal information associated with your application, and you can work with doing an appointment process to kind of work through this application process. Eligibility, of course, there's some stuff you've got to do to be eligible for assistance. All eligibility must be met prior to ranking deadlines to be considered for financial assistance during the current funding year allocation. So biggest one is you have to have farm records established with the Farm Service Agency. Basically, that is your information, name, address, social security number in the system tied to a specific piece of land that you own or lease and show control of that land. That land gets a farm and tract number and all gets associated to your social security number or tax ID number if you're an entity. Some things require cropping history to be reported. A big one is CRP. We also have certain USDA guidelines we have to follow, which means you have to have on file a current 1026, which is a highly erodible land and wetland conservation certification. Also have to show that you don't make too much money to be eligible for USDA programs. That's done through a 941 or adjusted gross income certification. Basically, under the current farm bill now is you cannot make more than $900,000 a year to be eligible for the program. There's also a 902, which is farm operating plan that has to be completed for your eligibility. So NRCS evaluates your applications based on local resource concerns and the amount of conservation benefit that will be provided through your application. This is done through a process with the local working groups that help set priority resource concerns, which is your soil and water conservation districts. And the biggest thing is all applications are not funded. It is a competitive process. Your application gets a ranking score based off of the amount of environmental benefit will be implemented through your application. So it doesn't have anything to do with the size of your land or anything or of who you are. It has all to do with the environmental benefit that is assessed through that application assessment and ranking process. If your application isn't funded, it can always be deferred to the next funding cycle. If you're selected for funding, you can choose whether or not to proceed to contract at the work. So basically, up until this point, if you're selected for funding, you are not obligated to anything at all whatsoever. It's only until you say, yes, I want to move forward to contract, you signed a contract, and that money is obligated to you, are you held to actually having to implement the work. You have to implement it to our standards and specifications, be eligible for payment, and NRCS or one of our partner agencies, like for instance in Georgia, Georgia Forestry Commission is responsible for certifying all of our forestry practices that are installed, and then we make payment based off of their certification. Once practice is completed, like I said, we do field visit. As long as everything is good, we push the payment button, and generally your payment is received within 10 business days from the time we hit that button. Some of the online resources you can look at is USDA.gov, farmers.gov. That new farmers website actually has been rolled into farmers.gov, so it's actually they merged it here in the past couple of weeks. So that web address is actually not applicable anymore. There's Web Soil Survey, which NRCS is responsible for mapping all the soil types across the entire country. So Web Soil Survey is the clearinghouse, so to speak, of all of that data. And you can find tons of really good information. You can go on there and create a folder, draw out your property, and get detailed soils information for your specific land. And then Gov Delivery is our email blast system for USDA. And I'd really strongly encourage you to go on there and sign up. That way, you know when any deadlines are coming or sign up announcement. It's just a really good way to get involved and know what's going on, so you don't call 2 days after a deadline. Happens to me at the office all the time. People calling in and say, hey, I want to sign up for this. Okay, that's great, but it'll be 18 months before your application is even eligible because of where we are in the program cycle. So it's a way that you as a landowner can be involved and proactive. Like I said, if you want to find your specific service center, so in Georgia or any of the states in the country, you can go to farmers.gov. Or the other thing is you can just Google search USDA Service Center Locator. And that will bring up the website for it. It'll pull up a picture of the entire country. You click on your state, you click on your county, and it lists all the contact information for Farm Service Agency, NRCS, Rural Development, any of the risk management agency, any of the primary service center agencies that are applicable for that county. And that's my contact information. Like I said, I'm in Screven and Effingham counties, which is along the eastern side of the state, fairly close to the coast here in Georgia. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, or if you've got any trouble trying to track down the right information to get in contact with your local service center, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to try and help route you to the right person. And that's it, Susan.
Daniel, appreciate it. We did have a couple of questions come in the chat for you. One question from Doug was if cropland and forest land can be within the same contract.
I'm assuming you mean by CSP or EQIP or what have you. Generally not, because they're two separate kinds of contracts. The CSP is, if you sign up for CSP, you have ag land and forestry land, you actually will do two separate applications and have two separate contracts with enhancement. And actually, it's going to be the same thing with EQIP, because in the funding categories, it's generally broken down in a lot of states, by cropland, non-irrigated, cropland, irrigated, forestry, and wildlife, or grazing is another big one. So pasture land, actually. So you're only competing with people for that funding in forestry or cropland irrigated or cropland non-irrigated, grazing. So it's not a hodgepodge where everybody's thrown into the same pool for the same funding. They break it out into percentages and compete against individuals for the same resource concerns.
Thanks. One more question from Jeff was, does EQIP or CRP have landowner income limits? And I think you had mentioned the AGI, but if you could maybe reiterate the adjusted gross income limits for
for all USDA programs, we do have an income limitation defined in the Farm Bill, and that's done through the adjusted gross income. So everything your tax ID, and that's $900,000 per individual or entity. The only thing that is not subject to AGI is actually EFRP, the Emergency Forest Restoration Program that the Farm Service Agency does. That program is not subject to the AGI limitation.
Thanks. And final question from Claire. She's wondering, has EQIP money been more restricted in the last 2 to 3 years after getting her longleaf planted? The money has dried up for helping keeping it properly burned, and she was wondering why that might be. I don't know if you have any you can share.
So that generally boils down to the number of applications that we get and the way the ranking process works. So a lot of states, the way the ranking is set up, reestablishment is going to rank higher than any management activity. So if all you're doing is asking for assistance for burning and maybe fire breaks, you're not going to rank out as high as any reestablishment person who's putting in for planting pine trees. Whether it's longleaf, loblolly, or slash, depending on which funding category or initiative There are some states have some initiatives or some specific funding categories that try and address burning standalone, but not many states have something set up like that. If you're looking for straight burning assistance, I'd encourage you to look at some of the partnership agreements. Georgia has one with the Longleaf Alliance. We're trying to help landowners get burning done. Earlier, Jason mentioned the Conservancy one as well. So those might be a better avenue of trying to get burning assistance. That's not to say don't keep applying for it, because you never know when it'll come through. It's just, it gives you another tool in the toolbox to try and help you get some money to keep the land burning.
Thanks, Daniel. If anybody else has other questions, continue to put them in the chat. I'm going to be your last speaker for today. So I'm going to go ahead and share some programs available through the Longleaf Alliance. But like I said, continue to put questions in the chat for myself or any other speakers as well. And can everybody see that okay? So I'm going to be talking about some of the assistance programs available through the Longleaf Alliance, who I work for. So the Longleaf Alliance is a nonprofit organization. We were formed in 1995, and our mission is to ensure a sustainable future for the longleaf pine ecosystem. So we're here to answer all your questions about longleaf and the management of longleaf ecosystems. So we can work to tailor assistance to each landowner's needs throughout the range of the longleaf pine. So we work throughout the Southeast in every state that has longleaf. And this technical assistance can be provided with site visits in person, over the phone, email. We also have some additional resources on our website, like our longleaf library. You can search for information on various topics and information specific to your region as well. And we also have a Longleaf Academy program. So these are some great training opportunities to help better prepare people to manage, restore, and enhance longleaf pine ecosystems. And you'll see on our website, we have an upcoming events tab, and there's all of our upcoming events, like academies, are going to be located there, and also where they're being offered. Sorry, my button wasn't working there for a moment. So the Georgia Sentinel Landscape Pilot Project, that is the project that I primarily work on. I am the Georgia Sentinel Landscape Project Coordinator. And we know that while prescribed burning has many benefits, there's also challenges associated with trying to get prescribed fire on the ground today. Things like liability concerns, limited burn windows, lack of resources. And so this project came about to help landowners overcome these challenges, and funding is provided through NRCS as well as the U.S. Department of Defense. And there's different aspects of the program, including technical assistance, financial assistance, and outreach programs as well. So while prescribed fire can be a very cost-effective tool when you're managing your forest lands, including longleaf pines, costs can still add up. So one of the aspects of this program is providing cost share for prescribed burning, fire breaks, and prescribed burn plans. And there is an emphasis on private land near Fort Stewart and Kings Bay Submarine Base. So you can see the eligible counties for this pilot project are those counties in orange and yellow. And then the cost share program details I'll be discussing is for those counties in orange on this slide. And you can see two of our main military installations, Fort Stewart and Kings Bay, are two of our main focuses. So the fiscal year 2022 cost share program is wrapping up now in that coastal area. The cost share rates this past year were $15 an acre for burning and 10 cents a foot for fire breaks. We do accept applications year round, and we are currently accepting them for 2023, which will end up covering burns between December of 2022 and August of 2023. We won't know what the cost share rates for the coming year are going to be until around September of this year. And then one thing to note too is that you can't, what we say, double dip. So if you're already getting cost share funding for prescribed burning through another program, such as EQIP that Daniel was just discussing. You can't get cost share for prescribed burning through this program as well. Beyond the cost share program, we also were able to provide 2 new burn trailers within the landowner would need to conduct a reasonable rate. And that QR code on the right-hand side, we now have an interactive online map on the Longleaf Alliance's website for Georgia. And if you scan that QR code with your smartphone, it'll take you to our website page, and you can see where a burn trailer is located nearest to you. We were able to fund 2 through this project, but several of the local resource conservation and development councils also have burn trailers available for rental. We're also providing learn and burn workshops. So this is a great opportunity to get a drip torch in your hand and really get some prescribed fire experience. We were able to partner with a bunch of other groups, and we're planning more for later this year. We also have the Lower Savannah River Watershed Initiative going on right now. Healthy and sustainable forest management helps produce clean water. And this is really a partnership between the Longleaf Alliance, forestry commissions in Georgia and South Carolina, and the U.S. Forest Service. And so the goal is to retain 60% of the forest cover in the watershed. And there is financial assistance available for certain practices, as well as offsetting certain costs. And a great contact for that is Lisa, who's on today's webinar as well. She's in charge of that program. Because of the tremendous benefits that flow from healthy private forests, we do have a longleaf seedling planting fund request that's open right now. It's open through our website until July 31st, and applicants are encouraged to apply as early as you can. And those applications will be reviewed no later than August. And there's multiple partners involved with this effort. The landowner is responsible for all work and will be reimbursed after the project is completed. And planting funds can be used in combination with other funding sources, but the same practice on the same track can't be covered twice. So again, we can't double dip. And I know I went through that kind of quick, but I thank you all so much for letting me talk a bit about our programs. I'm happy to further discuss any available assistance programs and can take any questions as well. All right, and it looks like we did have a question come in. Ryan and Daniel, perhaps what program, this question is from Edward, what program is best for assistance for stabilization of woods or harvest roads? Looking for something administered by GFC or USDA, mainly for soil stabilization and water runoff quality. Ryan or Daniel, do either of y'all?
Yeah, Daniel can give more information from an NRCS perspective, but we currently don't have any programs that fund stabilization. We recognize it's something that's definitely needed and something we'd like to get some funds to put towards a program. But NRCS does have some stuff available. Daniel, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so in EQIP, we have a practice called forest trails and landings. It addresses specific criteria. So it really, we need to do a site visit on the site to see what you have going on and see if the qualifications of that practice implementation would meet the needs of what you have going on out there. But generally, we're looking at possibility of water bars and turnouts to try, or broad-based dips, those types of things to try and address that sort of issue. We also have some stuff related to stream crossings as well that sometimes forest trails are eligible for. It really depends on meeting specific criteria on it.
Thanks, Ryan and Daniel. And thanks everyone for attending our webinar today. Here's the contact information on the screen for all of our speakers today, Ryan, Jason, and Daniel, and myself. And thank you again for joining us. I'm going to put up a quick poll, and we'd really appreciate your answers. It'll help us plan for our next webinar and just continue to provide a service and pertinent topics. So you should be seeing that on your screen, and it's just a quick 4 questions, and we really appreciate it. If you have any other questions too, feel free to stick them in the chat now, and feel free to you can take a picture of this slide, or feel free to reach out to me and I can get you all of the speakers' contact information as well.